So hello everybody, Reece Reviews here, and welcome back to the next entry in my Pixar ranking series. So, last episode, number 13, was A Bug's Life. And this week, this video, number 12 is Monsters University. So, this was directed by Dan Scanlon, who is actually... he is directing a movie about trolls that's coming up. I think it's the next Pixar movie that, after Coco, I think it's the next, new Pixar film, not including sequels. So that should be pretty good. I think it's about, these three trolls that lost their father. So it sounds like it could be, a fun movie. It sounds like it could be a really good movie. So he directed Monsters University. It was composed by Pixar, giant Randy Newman. Wonderful musician. And then some of your cast members, you've got Billy Crystal and John Goodman reprising their roles as Mike and Sully. And my favourite new character out of this movie was Helen Mirren playing Dean Hartscrabble. So this movie is a prequel to Monsters Incorporated, where we see Mike in his college years, university years, and he meets Sully. They don't hit it off straight away, and then basically he wants to become a scarer. And he wants to become a scarer, so he has to try and win these scare games. He gets kicked off of the program, he gets kicked off of the scare program through, unfortunate happenings, and to get back on it, he has to win these scare games. So it's a fun little plot. It is. It's not as memorable as some of the other movies. Definitely not as memorable as Monsters Inc. I don't think. Although I'm not a person that I'm not one of those people, because a lot of people would put Monsters Inc. in their top fives. A lot of people put them in their top three. I don't love it that much. I still really, really enjoy it, but it's not one of those Pixar movies. I'm yep, it's my favorite. But that's Monsters Inc. We'll get onto that when we get to it. This is Monsters University. So let's get right into the positives. So the first positive I want to talk about is it's a very funny script. Monsters Inc., respect as well, very, very good writing, very funny. And it translates into Monsters University perfectly as well. It's such a funny script. I think John Goodman and Billy Crystal have really good chemistry together. And I think this came at a good time, because this is obviously when everyone was considering Pixar's blue period, where they released, some really bad movies. Well, what other people think is bad movies. And so to have this in kind of Brave, Cars 2, those sort of things, it was nice to just kind of have a really funny movie. The second positive I want to talk about is extremely bold messaging for children. Now, I'm so sorry about my phone. I'm not one of the people who, I usually defend animation when people say they're kids' movies. That usually kind of irritates me. But, they will appeal to a younger demographic. And for a film like this that, will appeal to a smaller group of children, it was very bold. Because Mike is, a character who wants to become a scarer. And he gets told he can't do it. Dean Hartscrabble says to him, she says, you lack something that cannot be taught. You're not scary. And, saying no to his dreams is one thing, but it wasn't even sugar-coated. She literally just dropped it on him like a ton of bricks. You won't be a scarer. And that was such a bold thing to show for children. And it's maybe you won't have to get your dream. And that's something that I think was I really appreciated that in this movie. And I also appreciated the fact that it kind of showed that even though Mike did all his work and Sully didn't, Sully still had a bigger chance of becoming a scarer because, he's actually a scary monster. So, once again, this kind of falls into this category of, usually we see all these messaging for children. It's do work in school and you can achieve your dreams. But in this movie, it was just turned on its head. And I just think that was really, really bold. So finally, the final positive I want to talk about is, I think this movie, because I see a lot of people say this movie is unnecessary. And to an extent, I do agree with that, but at the same time, I think this movie provides really, really good development of the characters that we already love from Monsters, Inc. I did a stream with my good friend Rachel, a few weeks ago, where we ranked all the Pixar movies. We did two separate lists. We did a separate list each, and we ranked the Pixar movies. And I will leave that as a link in the description. Go subscribe to Rachel. Very good, very very fun YouTuber. So, because what we both agreed on is that this movie gets to a very emotional core of the characters that I think very few Pixar movies have really done. Because when we see Mike in Monsters, Inc., he's quite happy. You know, he's got a girlfriend, Cecilia, or whatever her name is. And, you know, he seems happy in his job. So, to go back to his childhood, his teen years, to see that he didn't achieve his dream, and then he had to think of a whole new dream, is really, really bold to show, and I think it was just a really, really good development, and I like that. And then, obviously, Sully, you know, Sully was a good character, because that's what they do a lot of times with Pixar. If you notice the sequels, they will have different characters as the main. In Monsters, Inc., the main character was Sully, but in Monsters University, it was Mike. In Cars, the main character was Lightning, and then in Cars 2, it was Mater, and then in, for example, Finding Nemo, the main character was Marlin, and in Finding Dory, the main character was Dory. So they usually try and switch it up, and I think it does work really well in this one. So yeah, it was just really, really good to see that sort of stuff. And then, but finally, there are some negatives. You will see when I get higher up on this list, there hardly will be any negatives, because, you know, I'd say at least my top 10 movies are just ones that I absolutely adore. But these ones still have a couple negatives, which just push them down a bit. So the first negative is, I think the scare games aren't as memorable as, you know, maybe the creators wanted them to be. Because, I don't know, to me, they didn't, I mean, they were fun, I suppose, but compared to the rest of the story, I don't think they were that strong. And then, like I said, to start with, the story is a little bit less memorable than, say, Monsters, Inc., or just other Pixar movies in general. Which, you know, can put it back a bit. But finally is one that, you know, I want to kind of explain, because usually I don't mind if there's no villain, because there's no villain in a lot of the Pixar movies. But my problem with there being no villain is because in Monsters Incorporated there was such a good villain with Randall and also Mr. Waternoose. But so going from a movie with one of the better Pixar villains, one of the only Pixar villains, there really isn't that many full villains in Pixar, but Randall was one of them, and he was a really good one. So going from that to kind of having no villain was a little bit of a weird switch that I wasn't a massive fan of. I would have liked to see a bit more of a, I mean, there were still a couple of antagonists, but they weren't strictly villains. So I suppose that could have been done a little bit better. But overall, it is a very enjoyable movie that does exactly what a prequel should do, I think. It just develops these already loved characters. And just shows you a bit more about them, and that's what I think it did, and that's what I think it should have done, and that's why I like it. But overall, because the story is a little bit less memorable, which makes it obviously a little bit more forgettable, compared to, like, pretty much the 11 movies on this list. So, those are my thoughts on Monsters University. If you have seen it, what did you think of it? I've seen a couple lists, actually, they put it in the top 5. I think it's one of the more underrated I don't think it's the most underrated Pixar movie, but it's definitely up there. We'll get to my most underrated when we get there. Some of you might already guess what it is, because, you know, we'll get there. So, yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, because then it lets me know that you like what I'm doing. Subscribe to stay updated with my content. And, yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you. Goodbye.